Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a presentation of hiring employees in today's world, finding hidden talents, sponsored by the Riverside County Workforce Development Board. I'm Stephanie Neely. I'm the marketing director here at CEA. While we wait for everybody to get settled into our virtual room, make sure you have some water, coffee, snacks, whatever you need. You're going to have a lot of information coming your way soon, so make sure you are buckled up and ready to go. I'd also like to go over a few housekeeping details with you. Your audio will be muted throughout this presentation, so we ask you to submit your questions and your comments through the chat box. It's the icon with the speech bubble at the very bottom of your screen. We'll try to answer them as we go. It might be a mix of answering in the chat box and answering them live. Your handouts for this presentation were attached to the reminder email that was sent out. If you did not receive them, please let me know in the chat box, send me your email address, and we'll make sure you get a copy of those. If you experience any other technical difficulties, let me know and I will help you troubleshoot. Because your feedback is very important to us, please complete the survey at the end of the webinar by accessing the QR code that will pop up on a slide. It shouldn't take more than a minute to complete. I promise it is very short, and it provides us with valuable feedback that we use to constantly improve our webinars. All right, your HR experts today are Training and Coaching Director, Jessica Rivera, and Keisha Hansen, our Learning and Development Director. With that, I'll hand it over to our experts.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome everybody. Happy to be with you today. And a special thanks to Riverside County Workforce Development Center for sponsoring this for everyone today. And our partnership with them allows for employers in Riverside County to contact us with any HR questions you might have. There's so much to be aware of in California when it comes to compliance around human resources. And we have a bank of human resource subject matter experts who are available to you to call in and ask questions that might arise in the workplace. So we encourage you, take advantage of this hotline. It's a free resource to you. And we are ready and willing to work with you on your HR issues and answer any questions you might have. We appreciate the partnership. And who are we at CEA? One of the things that's important to know as we provide human resources, services, and solutions is that we are not attorneys. We always recommend that if you have something of a legal nature that requires attorney involvement, that you always seek appropriate legal counsel. If you happen to call us with a question and you have a concern, we'll guide you the same way and say you may need to talk to your counsel about this. So just to know that we don't dispense legal advice, we're not attorneys, but we do have a bank of knowledge around human resources and compliance for the state of California. And then as you take a look at who we are as an organization, we work with employers throughout the state of California. We receive over 100 calls a day from employers with questions about employee issues, and at times over 2,000 calls a month. And so we provide phone service. We provide a lot of other services to employers in California who are members with CEA. And we encourage, especially you, like we said, you have the resource of the hotline. Give us a call if you have any questions. But our expertise is human resources, services, and solutions. With that in mind, what we'll be talking about today is we'll be talking about hiring trends, what we're seeing, what we're hearing about in the workplace. Also, we'll talk a bit about how to elevate your hiring process. We talk with employers all of the time about, gosh, what else do I need to do to get those right people on board? And we'll talk a lot about how you show up as an organization, how your company shows up to make sure that when you start that relationship with a prospective employee or a candidate, that you get it right from the start, that first impression is a positive one for your organization. And then, of course, finding that hidden talent. There's talent in places we may not have looked yet, so we'll talk a bit about that. And with me today, as Stephanie mentioned, is Keisha, who will also be talking about several things too in a little bit. With that in mind, recruitment, this is an interesting quote from LinkedIn. And what LinkedIn talks about is for this year, and we've probably already experienced it and we've seen it, that our success in recruitment is going to require us being flexible, adapting, really getting creative and innovative when we think about what we have to do to get that right candidate, and a laser focus on that candidate experience. not the employer experience, but that candidate experience is so important, because even today, candidates still have choices. And we want to be that employer that they choose, especially if they're that top talent that we can use in our company. So I have a poll to start off with for you, if you could take a moment and answer this. And the question for you is, what challenges do you have currently with hiring? And you can see there's 6 different options here. And so let me bring this up for you. If you would take a moment and answer that for us, that would be very helpful as we discuss this today. So is it skills? Is it talent? Is it a demand for flexible work, managing the recruiting process? Is it competition that's causing you some concerns? Give everybody just another moment.
All of the above.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's end this and let's just show what this what the results are for everybody. Let's take a look. And as you talent shortage, so we still hear that, we're still seeing that, and you're still experiencing that. And yes, that demand for flexible work that we're going to talk about too, because it's not a request anymore. It's pretty much an expectation that we're seeing and hearing. And then also, how do I compete with my competitors? How do they choose my company in an industry where they have other choices? So those seem to be the ones that are really showing up for you now. The skills gap doesn't seem to be an issue, or managing the recruiting process. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, on how maybe you can get that edge over your competitors through your recruiting process. Okay. The hiring trends in this year and pretty much into 2025 is we're seeing quite a bit of emphasis now on skills versus degrees. For the longest time, we had quite a bit of attention on the college degrees, further education, things of that nature. So with that in mind, oh, just a moment. Keisha, is my slide still showing? Okay, you're still seeing my slides? Hold on just a minute, because I'm not. Give me just a moment. Hold on. I apologize. I'm not seeing my slides. Okay. All right. So as we take a look, you can still see them good, Keisha, the whole slide? Great. Okay. So as we think about the top skills that we are looking for, the hiring trends, I apologize. The hiring trends in 2024, the emphasis on skills versus degrees. And we are seeing now that a lot of the recruiting pros are telling us that 73% of them, they're basing now on hiring skills versus a college degree, because as we've beat that drum before over our time and the work that we're doing, we know how important those skills are, and that's continuing to become even more and more important. Also, as I mentioned, not a request anymore, but that demand for flexible work, people wanting to have that ability to have choices in the work that they do and that flexibility that they need. So with that in mind, we have to be prepared as employers to make sure that we talk about that, both in our job postings and also throughout the recruiting process, if we do have that ability to do that for employees. Also, artificial intelligence. We're hearing quite a bit about AI and what it may mean to recruiting, what it may mean to other things around getting those right candidates. And there's quite a bit of benefit to artificial intelligence, things like you having those easier job descriptions, being able to automate tasks, to spend more time on those important tasks when it comes to recruiting. And there's quite a bit around artificial intelligence, a lot of controversy around it. So making sure in your organization that you have a policy to ensure that people are using it for the right reasons, that you're able to use it as something that benefits your company and your process. And just also understanding that some of these tools are not as current as some of the other technology that we have available. An example would be ChatGPT. When they first came out, they were a couple of years behind on some of the information that they were sharing. So things had changed in a few years. So again, being mindful of the tools that you're using and ensuring that you have um, some guidelines around that for your folks if they're working with it. And then also the positive candidate experience. We cannot emphasize that enough. We want to be that employer of choice when we're recruiting. We want people to be excited about joining our company. And we'll talk about how everything matters when it pertains to that candidate experience. Also, upskilling employees. We know that our youngest generations who are in the workplace, they want to be trained, they want to learn, they want to grow. And are we continuing to demonstrate that we develop our employees that are with us? And also, are we upskilling our own recruiting team to make sure that they can stay up with the trends that we're seeing in the recruiting space today? Also, we've been hearing a lot about some layoffs when it comes to technology and industry, and we know, and we're hearing from several workforce boards too that we work with on some of the layoffs that we're seeing also in the food industry with restaurants, and you probably heard about several of these restaurants. But the most that we've seen so far in the last, I would say, 12 months has to do with the larger technology companies who actually overhired quite a bit, and now they're finding they don't have a need for that many employees. And with that in mind,
Did you notice,
what do employees?
Jessica, I just wanted to mention the chat. Just there was a quick mention of the fast food is kind of a competitor now because of the minimum wage going up to $20 an hour. So if you haven't increased your minimum wage, and then also looking for the right person and assessing their personality to see if they are that can-do person and self-starting an initiative. And I was about to say it in chat, but it's easier to just verbalize that we'll be talking about some questions and maybe modifying interview questions to assess and review personality as well as skill.
Thank you, Keisha. And I appreciate you bringing that up because as we do this webinar today, Keisha will keep an eye on the chat for me, and I'll do that when she's presenting too. So I appreciate you bringing that up and jumping in and sharing that information. But absolutely, all of those things are important. So what do employers need? What are they telling us that they need? And according to LinkedIn, these are all the skills that we need as employers in the workforce today. And as you can see, that number one is communications. And that's something you're pretty much able to assess when you're interviewing people, when you're talking with those candidates. And then the others you'll be able to assess based on their experience, as well as the questions that you'll be asking them as they go through the interview process with you. But these are all very important, and you may have some additional ones that you add for yourself based on the industry and the role that you have. But these are what employers are saying. These are the top skills we need. And as you can see, those top three: communication, customer service. Some of us feel these days that there's something lacking in service when we're interacting with customers, whether it's a company that's on site, online, whatever that may be, that there's just something lacking. And then also that ability to lead and to inspire and motivate people in your own team as a leader. So these are all very important. And again, you may have some that you're adding to your own mental list as you look at this. Some of the strategies for 2024, and this is according to SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, and they talk about this because it's so important for companies to be aware of how do I get that leg up on my competition? How do I make things happen so I get candidates knocking at my door? And the number one is treating candidates like customers, how we treat them from that very first interaction, which can be just our job posting that I'll talk about. But how do we treat them throughout that process so they feel that they're valued, they feel that they're important, they feel that they mattered? And this is a company I want to work with because that's sharing with them a lot about your culture. Also, a job ad that reflects your company. Many times when I work with companies and when I look at job postings online, or even on websites for the companies, they're pretty vanilla. They're not compelling. They're not getting a candidate excited about working for that company because they're talking about everything they need for that particular from that particular person or that candidate. They're not talking so much about what's in it for you as a candidate. So those job ads, you really want them to pop in a way that talk about your culture, the benefits to a prospective candidate, why they want to come and work for you, why they want to apply with your company for this role. And then also utilizing those niche job boards, finding those job boards that connect to what your industry is, what your company does. There are associations that have quite a few job boards. There's organizations that have job boards. There are vocational schools. All of those things can be helpful to you as you're recruiting for your specific job and then tying it into your industry. Always good to use an Indeed, ZipRecruiter, or those others to post your job. But many times, if you can find a niche job board, you'll get more qualified candidates. And then also making, the interview engaging, and we'll spend some time on that. How we keep people interested throughout the whole process, the interviews that we go through. Most of us interview more than one time with a candidate before we extend an offer. And how do we, as hiring managers, as leaders, as employees, how do we support our hiring managers through the process? Because many times in some companies, they may not have a specific recruiter, yet you have to still bring someone on board when you lose someone. So how do we set that up so we help our hiring managers show up in a way that they don't feel overwhelmed, overworked, because they're doing their own job. And yes, I also have to recruit too. So how do we support them? And also, if you have a human resources department, human resources professionals, how can we support each other through that process? And then taking a look too, reevaluating that experience versus the education. Gosh, if I have someone that has 10 years in a specific role that I'm looking for, 10 solid years of experience, and they may not have their college degree, but they have shown that they have grown and developed themselves through those years, that's going to be very compelling if I'm saying I need a college degree, because you can't replace those 10 years of experience. Also, thinking about reaching out to past applicants. The reason we talk so much about making that experience with candidates, all candidates, a pleasant one, a good one, a positive one, is because that first candidate doesn't always work out. And you may have another role that opens up where you can reach out to a candidate that maybe they weren't right for the job you had hired for, you were posting for, but gosh, they're right for that next job. They're right for what's just come up that you could really use them. And we have seen this happen time and time again. And then tapping untapped talent, which we'll talk a bit more about too, hopefully giving you some ideas. And then also an employee referral program, starting something that encourages your employees to be thinking about, gosh, this person would work really well at my company, or making them aware if we're recruiting for a position, do you know somebody? Our employees are not going to recommend just anyone to us. They're going to recommend people that they know, that they respect. That's going to be important to them because that's their name that they're putting on someone they recommend. So considering using your employees as ambassadors and recruiters for you. And then also recruiting videos, perhaps having something on your own site, something that's a link that shows people talking about your company, some of the benefits of working at your company, some of the fun things you do, your mission, your purpose. All of those things can be very, very compelling to a prospective candidate when they're weighing their options. So when we talk about elevating your hiring process, and we think about how can we best do that, one way to think about this is when we think about a saying, a quote by Frank Passetto from Xerox, which at one time was extremely, powerful and large and successful, still successful. But one of the things that really helped them in their success is his belief, how he led that company, and looking at how we treat people. Do we develop them? Do we cherish them? Do they know they're important? Do they know we care about their success, their ongoing success, not just when they start with the company, but their ongoing success at a company. And we always say that people won't always remember what you say, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel. And if you can make your candidates feel that this is a company I want to work for, it can go a long way in them continuing through the process with you. We want people to be engaged from the very beginning when you're recruiting them to your company. And when we think about our hiring process, our recruiting process, I have a question for you, and feel free to put this in the chat. Do you have a specific established process for recruiting in your company, or do you have as needed? You'll assign what has to be done, who does what, who's available to bring people on board. We work with employers throughout California and throughout the country too, who have employees here in California. And sometimes they have a very structured process. Other times they're trying to keep up, get somebody hired, and they're assigning it to different folks. So the reason I bring it up is having a recruiting process for your company can be very, very helpful, even if it's something as simple as a checklist, just to make sure that you have a process that's consistent, that you're treating all candidates the same as they come through the pipeline at your company, and also for clarity for people who are doing recruiting for you. So here's what candidates tell us, what they want, what they need. And I hear this time and time again. We at CEA do recruiting consulting with our members and with employers. And we've experienced this ourselves, both in recruiting for our members and also recruiting for ourselves at our company. And they have candidates want something that's easy and intuitive throughout the process. They want something that's not going to be cumbersome, that's not going to be complicated, that's not going to be unclear to them, because they have other choices and they continue to have other choices, even based on the quick poll that we did together a few moments ago. Finding that right talent is not easy. So we have to make the process for candidates as easy as possible for them. And I've had people who have applied for roles when I was doing a lot of recruiting for other members. And I recall one person who had just submitted an interest. I think it was through ZipRecruiter for a position, and didn't attach the resume. So I sent a follow-up to this individual, and I asked them for their resume, and they pretty much told me that their resume was on LinkedIn. And I went to LinkedIn, and sadly, unfortunately for this candidate, there wasn't enough there to say this person was qualified or not. But again, the process, just something as simple as asking, which we never think would be an issue, is asking for a resume. That's an extreme example of low tolerance. Most people are great about providing their resume right up front, yet we don't want to make the process, again, so cumbersome that they'll just look elsewhere. Also, salary transparency, really important in California. We have to list the range. If we're advertising for a position in California, you want to list the range, you want to list your benefits, you want to make sure that people know what they're going to get. Because applying for a role, because interviewing can take so much time, that salary transparency can be a big benefit to you, also for your folks. You don't want to find that if we don't post that, which we have to, if you have 5 or more employees, you want to make sure that people know, if I'm going to go through this process, the range is something I can work with. We've heard stories where companies have gone through that process, the final stage, they make an offer, and it's not something a candidate can live with. They can't live off of that wage. So making sure that you're very transparent around that is really important. Timely communication, making sure that we're staying on top of those resumes that are coming in, that we're following up, that we walk people through what's going to happen and stay on top of those communications. And also something that can be really important and helpful to you is making sure you know what the best way to reach a candidate is. Is it through text? Is it through phone? Is it through email? We all know people that we work with who may not ever listen to their voicemail, but they check their text or they'll check their email, making sure that we know what's going to get us that response when we follow up with a candidate. I've already talked about flexible work, whether it's schedules, remote, hybrid. Um, some companies are doing 4-day work weeks. So those types of things are what candidates are saying they want also in today's workplace. The clear expectations of the hiring process, and whoever is doing your screening or making that first contact or even doing the job posting, let people know what the steps are along the way. One of the tips that I always provide to folks, because you don't have to respond to every single resume that you get, especially if it's not someone who's qualified. So even in your ad, you may want to put something in there that says, once we receive your resume, we will contact all qualified candidates. And that gives you that flexibility that if I get someone who's nowhere near has the qualifications I need, I don't have to reach out to them. And an example for me was when I was doing some recruiting for an associate attorney for an organization, and they needed an attorney, and I was getting resumes from people that hadn't even gone to law school. So it was clear they weren't going to be considered for an attorney role. It happens, and we all have our stories we could share. And then also, candidates want a workplace that prioritizes diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in the workplace, a place I feel that I can do my best work, be my best self, be my authentic self. And I recently saw a statistic from SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Management, where they said that having a healthy culture in a company is 10 times more important to people than pay. We want to look forward to going to work. We want to be excited about where we work. We want to be able to really feel good about the things that we do and look forward to the job, the people that we connect with on a daily basis. So that culture, you can't overlook that when it comes to talking to candidates, posting jobs, things of that nature. If you have a great culture, my best advice is sell it, sell it, sell it. So let's take a look. And this was a survey that was done, and it's called The Ultimate Guide to Attracting Gen Z by a company, Zazon. And it talks about employee motivators and demotivators. And these are tied to Gen Z. And if you recall, our Gen Z generation, they're those workers who were born during the late 90s, early 2000s. They're the newest employees in the workplace today. And these are what they told, they said in the survey that they took. And the top 4 motivators for them is having a good manager. For those of you who are privileged to lead people, it's important to know that employees don't leave the company, they leave you. That's how important you are as a manager. The impact you have on them in their engagement, how they feel about a company, is critical to their success and to their retention in staying with your company. So also salary and wages is important, making sure that we don't just talk about the salary, but we also talk about the whole benefits package, right? When we think about a compensation package, it's salary, it's benefits, it's additional things that we do as an organization for our employees. It's the wellness that we have for them, the programs that we have for them. That's all part of that compensation benefit. And so we want to make sure that we talk about that. I have worked with employers and I said, they've shared with me, well, we do this for our employees. And I said, but you're not talking about it. You need to talk about that. You should post it in the ad. That's a pretty big deal. One employer was paying 100% of both employee and dependents' health insurance. And they weren't talking about it. For all of us who have dependents, for those of us where that's extremely important, we want to make sure we sell that. And then, of course, the work-life balance, and we have our youngest generations to thank for that. Our boomers weren't so good about work-life balance. Our millennials started to beat that drum that they demanded to have that work-life balance. So we're seeing that that continues to be important. Excuse me. Also, flexibility that I've talked about. What is the flexibility you have in your workplace? You still have to run your business, but do you have some things that would be incentives for prospective employees? And then taking a look at the demotivators. Obviously, the opposite of what we're seeing with good managers. but also that culture. How is that culture? Is it showing up in a way, the environment, when a candidate comes into your office, if people aren't talking, if they're not laughing, if they get a sense of that energy, they may get a sense this may not be the place I want to work. Also, low wages. We're not being transparent. This is not going to work for me. Excuse me. Lack of recognition. Gallup has said they do tons of surveys around employee engagement, retention. They've said that employees, need to be recognized every 7 days for their hard work. Our jobs aren't getting easier. So talking about the recognition that you do for employees can be very powerful when you're interviewing people.
Also, Jessica, I was just going to mention, this is good for those of that were mentioning they're struggling with the salary, with food and beverage, raising the minimum wage, is emphasizing those things that they can offer. And our youngest generation has observed their parents, their grandparents who did have unhealthy work environments, right? That cultures that made them stressed, that made them burnt out. So they're looking for something different. So if you can really emphasize that, if you can't pay a certain wage, but you're still there within a livable wage, and you have other things to offer, and above all, you have good managers and you have a great work environment. That's really the focus that you need to emphasize.
Great points, Keisha. And when Keisha talks a little bit later about finding hidden talent, you're going to see some of the folks that she talks about. They've already had the tough work culture. They're working because they enjoy it and they want to have a really great experience. They don't have to work anymore, but if you can get them on board, they can bring a lot of value to your company. And the whole piece about your culture and the things you're able to do will attract some of those folks that sometimes we don't think about when we're recruiting. And so when we think about the recruiting process, we always want to be, compliant when we recruit. We always want to make sure that we treat all candidates consistently, that our process is consistent. So no one gets any special attention. We go through the whole process. And once you've posted that position for your company, you may be inundated with replies or you just may get a few. Either way, you want to make sure that you have a process on how to handle the whole recruiting journey and be able to talk to those candidates that you want. So we post the ad, and then we're going to start looking at those resumes coming in. Please know you don't have to contact everyone who sends a resume in, but you do want to start screening them. I call it the yes pile, the maybe pile, and the absolutely not qualified pile when I'm going through looking at resumes. And I definitely want to get a hold of the yes, they have the qualifications, and the maybe I may have to talk with them a little bit more. But we want to make sure that as we go through those, that as we screen them, we do it in a way that we're not just looking for, do they have every single requirement, but do they have the majority of what I need for this role? And nothing replaces human eyes. All of you know what's going to work in your organization for a role, and you may pick something up that even though the person may not have every box checked off, they have some things that are applicable and are transferable to the role that you're recruiting for. And then also job application complete. Our process at CE is we do want people to fill out a job application, because a resume, they can tell you pretty much whatever they want to tell you in that resume, but that job application is a legal document and they have to sign that everything they put on that job application is true and accurate. So you want to make sure, if you can, to get that job application. Also, as you're going through and looking at your process, conducting screen interviews. And what we mean by that is we'll call somebody, we'll pick up the phone and we'll talk with them, find out, get a little bit of information, especially for recruiting for a hiring manager. If we're an HR person, we want to get a little bit more information to see how they communicate, to see if they're responsive, to see how they show up. Do they sound knowledgeable about the role? And so as you do the screen interview, you may have some of the yeses that are going to go to the no pile, or you may have them definitely as one of your top candidates, but that gets you started. So you're doing the interview. Then we always recommend that you create a set of questions that you want to ask those people in further detail when you do a virtual or you bring them on site. And we always recommend behavioral questions, which really can help you understand and give you insights how they've handled situations before. If you go hypothetical and say, how would you handle an irate customer? And they tell you a wonderful story, that's great, but I want to know if they've done this before. I want to get a little bit more insight on situations. So if you have a candidate who's given you difficulty, and when you ask them a question, tell me about a time when you had a very difficult customer. What did you do to be able to give them, a result that satisfied them? That you'll start seeing as they talk through that, you'll get insight as to how they conduct themselves in those situations. And it'll give you far more than just a customer experience. It'll tell you how they handle conflict, how they communicate. If you have a candidate that's really struggling to give you any specific examples, you might want to really think about that candidate. Many times they'll give you a general example, so I'll ask them for a little more specific. Tell me about one particular time that sticks with us. We all have those customers. We all have those situations. So as you go through the interviews, we also recommend making sure that you're prepared and you really show up well as an organization and as a team that that candidate wants to work with, because you've done everything well. You've done it very professionally. They really like what they're seeing about the company. All of that is really important. And we've all been to an interview where we're talking to somebody that maybe hadn't prepared for our interview and they're flustered and you feel like, gosh, I don't know about this company. We've all had that experience, I'm sure, at one time or another. We don't want to be that employer. We want to show up well, prepared, welcoming to a candidate. And then also we go to the checking references and making an offer. Checking references can be the difference for you between getting a great candidate and maybe getting a candidate that you're going to have issues with very soon after you hire them. You want to talk with people who have been their supervisors. You want to talk with people who have worked with them, vendors, partners who have worked with them, and find out, ask specific questions about, what are their strengths? What showed up well? Would you want to work with them again? Things of that nature. That can make a big difference. And one last thing about references, if they call you right away and give you a great reference, that delivers a pretty strong message. This is a good candidate. If they don't call you back, if you have to keep trying to reach a reference, that's another message too, why they're not calling you back. So when I coach candidates and we do work with job seekers, I always coach them to make sure that your references are people who are going to call back and you know what they're going to say. You'd be surprised at some of the things Keisha and I have heard when we've done recruiting. We always tell a candidate, make sure that reference is going to give you a good reference, because we've actually had candidates who've given us references and they weren't positive when we called the people. And then of course we make that offer. And we'll talk a bit more about that.
Another tip is also to let the candidate know that we will be calling, because we all have busy lives. Maybe this is a person we haven't talked to in 2 years or 3 years. So just give them a heads up that this person's going to be contacting you, and then they'll be ready. That usually works for us.
Yes, so important. They need to stay in touch with their references too. Yes. I see a couple of comments in the chat. Let me just take a look. Yeah, Kim talks about a screen interview, a phone screen interview. You can do that pretty quickly. You may find out in 10 minutes this isn't a candidate you want to work with. And then also, it can also tell you, gosh, this is someone really good. I want to get back with them as soon as I can and start really talking about them, because they come across so beautifully. And another thing to think about too is you're screening and you're trying to reach people. What's their response time? Are they getting back with you right away? Do you have to try several times to reach someone? Because that also gives you a message also. Are they really serious about your company if they're waiting too long to get back with you? But those who are getting back with you right away and are very responsive tells you a message that these people take initiative, they're serious. And the whole response time these days is something that we could probably talk about for a whole hour on what's an appropriate response time. So when you have people who are on the ball, quick to do that, that also sends a very strong message about the quality of that candidate. So your recruiting team, if we still have people working in companies who are waiting for resumes to come in, and we're going to get all these resumes for a position, that's gone by the wayside. We've been seeing such a trend in recruiters having to actually go out going out to find candidates, not just having them come in. So the question when we talk about proper skills, do they have the right recruiting skills? You have to have that ability to be persistent, resilient, and if resumes aren't coming in or we're not getting the right candidates, being able to switch, be creative, be innovative. How do I get candidates? If what I'm working is not giving me what I need to be able to move fast to get that top talent in. Are they adaptable? Are they willing to transition to what's required to attract top talent today? Some of past recruiters I've talked to, they pretty much told me this job's just getting too hard. It's frustrating. People don't get back with you when they say they are. They're ghosting us. So you want to have people who have that ability to adapt to the new environment. Excuse me. Do they have the expertise? Do they have the tech savvy? Do they have technical skills, sales skills? Are they upskilling themselves to stay current? And then, of course, their experience. It's not a job anymore for entry-level employees. It just isn't. If you're putting somebody who's new to the job, new to the company, trying to recruit for you, it's going to be tough. You want your recruiters to be brand ambassadors for your company. You want them to talk with passion, conviction, excitement about why a candidate wants to work for your company. And if you put a brand new person on that job, they're not going to have that that confidence or that competency right away. So making sure that whoever's recruiting for you, that you feel really good that they're going to deliver to a candidate what an experience working at your company can be. Because we do have to sell these days. And for some people, selling is not as comfortable as it is for others. So when candidates apply, when they actually send their information in, send their application in, everything matters. And as you can see through through this visual here, making sure that we are staying on top of our connection with them, that we're doing everything within this process that's consistent, that whoever they talk to, whoever they engage with, they're getting a feel for the company. And hopefully it's a consistent feel for the company, and they're feeling better and better throughout the entire process. So it's like a first impression. When we put that job posting out there, and then they send their information in and they're qualified, good talent, that first impression really matters. So whoever reaches out to that candidate, you want to make sure that it's a great impression in that first contact. It takes about 7 seconds to make a great first impression, but it takes 8 consecutive interactions to make up for a bad impression, first impression. So making sure that that first interaction is a really positive one for the candidate. It will keep them engaged. And then also the question I asked, are you screening all candidates? Making sure there are artificial intelligence tools, applicant tracking tools, but what's important about if you're using those is still take a look, just a quick look at those applications, because they may reject them if someone hasn't worked in 6 months, for example. And we all know that life happens to us. Someone may have taken time off because they were caring for an ailing family member. They may have had to take some time off for situations that we understand as human beings. Artificial intelligence may not understand that, but we know life happens. So it's important that we take a look at those, have human eyes on them. Also, they may exclude someone if they don't check every single box. If it's not fitting every single box for AI, just black and white, we can look at things, all of us can look at a resume and make connections that AI can't make, or that a human brain cannot make. So it's important that you have someone looking at those to make sure that something's not being missed, or a really strong potential candidate might work for you because you see something that technology may not. And then this is probably one of my favorite slides to talk about, because if you have a marketing department, get them involved in your job postings, have them help you create a really compelling job posting that will stand out from all of the vanilla ones that we see on job boards today. And you want to make sure that it's an easy to understand language. I can look at that job posting as a candidate, connect the dots. Yes, I can do this. I've done this. It's a very specific job posting. The word choices make me want to work for this company. Making sure we separate the required and preferred qualifications. Surveys have shown that, a lot of candidates, if they don't have 80% of the qualifications, they won't apply. And we want people to apply, even if they have 60% of the qualifications, because we can make up for the rest in training. Also, you want to make sure all of your job postings comply with all California and, of course, federal laws. And then to take it out just a little bit further, to expand on that just a little bit more, make it stand out from the crowd. Tell your company's story, all the wonderful things about your company, the team that this candidate will work with, the innovative things that you do at your company, your commitment to community, to employee culture, to the company culture, to employees. All of those things are so important to candidates. Make it look good. Make sure that it's set up in a way that it's appealing, because we're selling our job to candidates. We're the ones that are making it stand out. They're looking at it from the standpoint of, what's in it for me? Do I want to even attempt to try to apply for this job? I've already talked about the salary range and the benefits that your company offers to make sure that stands out. And if you like, send them a link on a video to hear more about your company. We all have videos that we may have done at one time or another. If not, but just some things that employees say about your company, working for your company. There are so many ways that you can do that. It can be so powerful to get the excitement up for a candidate, and really helpful for them to better understand your company. And with that in mind, let me just take a quick look. Okay, just taking a look at the chat. Thank you, Kim. Great idea. Kim talks about in the chat box that use ChatGPT. If you haven't played with that, try it. We encourage you. Think about that. If you don't have a marketing department to give you a real compelling ad or put it together for you, try ChatGPT. We call that starter dough, something we can work with. Ask him to give you a really compelling ad. Give them some information about the job, and still keep your proprietary information away from ChatGPT, but give them a general idea. They will start an ad for you, give you something you can work with. We use it a lot at CEA when we need something quick, but it can really help you in really zhuzhing up that job posting for you. So with that in mind, I am now going to turn it over to my illustrious colleague, Keisha, who will get us going on the second part of our session today.
I learned something new, starter dough. I never heard you say that before. That's a great one. So I put up a poll while we're doing a little bit of a transition, and this is multiple choice, so you can pick all that apply or other, but how do you currently conduct your interviews? And how are you feeling about everything? You might be feeling, oh my gosh, I have to change this or that, and you're not alone, because the way we recruit today is not the way we recruited even 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And Jessica and I, who have been a part of recruiting for our members and employers, have experienced that firsthand. So we feel your pain, or we're just there with you if there are some changes or modifications that you need to make. So that's a good one. Not only hiring manager interviews. That's good that not only the hiring manager interviews, right? Because usually we do want to get a second opinion, a third opinion, depending on the position. If it's entry level, if it's management level, we want to have some other insight so that we can look at it more objectively, right? And not just take it from one person. So good, you guys are doing good in that. You all do in-person interviews, some virtual interviews, phone interviews. We usually use those for the screening. As was mentioned prior, panel interviews can be intimidating, but it also can, if you're trying to make that determining decision, it can really make a difference in terms of how that person responds, and also depending on the position that they might have, right? Oh, of course, I went over here. Here we go. Just fast forwarding. Reviewing. So you may want to consider, if you aren't getting candidates right away, or you do have a lot of competition, is it time to reshuffle the interview process? And I think both Jessica and I strongly believe that the onboarding process really does begin with that initial contact with your candidates. That's giving them insight into what your company is going to be like. So if you really are persistent in contacting them, you're really enthusiastic, as mentioned, and you really are giving some general insight into what the company is going to look like, that's giving positive messages to that candidate, because it is so much more of a two-way street these days. And in some circumstances, the candidates have more pull. But you really do want to give that positive experience. It used to be back in the day, oh, I'll put a job posting and then I'll wait for the hundreds of resumes to come in. And not necessarily happening anymore. So there's a little bit more work, as Jessica mentioned, involved, and strategy. So get people involved. Really, if things aren't working, is there something that we're doing? Can we change some of the questions? One thing that we always do is make sure that we are asking the same questions to every candidate to make it fair, to make it consistent. But again, if you do have entry-level positions, maybe someone who has never worked before, you might want to modify a little bit, just based on their own experience or lack of experience, and extend it to what is their experience in working in high school or college, to give some of those behavioral questions some relevance to those people that don't have lengthy job experience. Also, really pay attention to those hiring managers, because people quit because of their managers, and they also don't accept jobs because of the people that are interviewing them. So if the hiring manager isn't great at interviewing, you might want to have a sit down and see what they're doing, what they're asking. I remember this from a previous training that Jessica did, where the one of the HR managers said the hiring manager spent 4 hours with a candidate when they only told him it was going to be an hour and a half. And he really only spoke about himself and his career. So we don't advocate for that at all. You really want the candidate to do most of the talking, probably 80% of the talking and you 20%. But we'll talk about, they'll have some questions too, because we have a more savvy generation who are really looking to make the right fit for themselves. So they want to have some answers and some questions answered as well. Then again, Jessica has said it beautifully over and over. We really do want to highlight our company culture, our brand, and really be consistent. If there are several people within the company talking about the company culture, talking about the company brand, we don't want those inconsistencies. We don't want a candidate to be confused. Well, gosh, Jessica told me this, and then Kim told me that. I'm not really sure what the company culture is. And that also applies to the job description. Maybe Jessica will explain something really great to me and give me all the highlights, but I'm not seeing any of the challenges or maybe some of the parts of the job. And you really do want to be as transparent as possible. If someone has to work graveyards a couple weeks a month, or if there's a busy period during the holidays, you really want to get that out. Especially as somebody mentioned at the beginning, how do I know if this person has a can-do attitude and takes initiative? If they're not, blinking too many eyes when you're mentioning those hardships, if they're saying, oh gosh, that sounds fine, I can handle that. And the true test is once they come, but you're going to get a pretty good idea if they can handle it, if they're not questioning that. I've had candidates, as soon as I said, well, you're going to, there are some weekends involved, and they say, oh, forget it, I can't accept this job. Then you really know. But really, sometimes companies, will sugarcoat things, and you don't want to scare people away, but you do want to talk about the busy times, when it gets really tight, especially if you are in hospitality, customer service, all of those things. And then how do you respond to that as a company, and what do you do to support your employees? And then again, we'll talk about with hidden talent as well. And just to emphasize again, what is a trend, looking for the potential in someone, especially if you are hiring entry-level people and they have the same exact number of years of experience, and someone's enthusiastic, someone's positive, someone's done the research on your company before the interview, I'm probably tend to that person rather than the person who's asking me, well, what does your company do again? I'm not really sure. So those things do play a part in the interview process and making that critical decision. And then we did talk a little bit already about behavioral questions, and there's so many resources online. You can even look sometimes at your competitors to see kind of what questions they're asking. Sometimes candidates will put that on Glassdoor and say, oh gosh, they asked me these questions. And it used to be back in the day, you really kind of wanted to intimidate people by your questions, but I think that doesn't really get authentic responses. Because people do get nervous when they're interviewing. I think we've all been in situations where we get nervous. So for us, we really want to create a safe space and environment where people can truly be authentic. We always give people time to process the question if they're not familiar with the question or it hasn't been asked to them before, so that we're really going to get a genuine and authentic answer. And in my experience, I usually know if someone has practiced the answer over and over again. There are people who interview really well and then they get to the job and not so much, not so great. But really, when you're asking different questions, you might word them differently or re-emphasize them. But we really do want to put people at ease. But we do want to find out what skills they have. And again, as Jessica mentioned, the hypothetical, if they haven't done something, is great. But also, what have you done? Right? If you haven't had a job and this is your first time in customer service, have you really ever encountered a difficult person or a difficult situation? And how did you handle that? Right. So again, making modifications if it is a more entry-level position. But having those behavioral questions really can give us an idea of how a person would behave when they're actually on the job. So we want to make them as job specific and realistic as possible. We don't want to include questions that really won't have anything to do with the job that they're doing. And again, separating action from knowledge, really, we can ask questions about skills, but what would they hypothetically do if we're looking towards aspirational things in the future as well? And then be prepared for questions from your candidates. Again, we have more savvy candidates. They go online, they're looking at Glassdoor, they're looking to see what other people's experiences were. And as I mentioned previously, people are looking more for a healthy and a positive work environment. So they're asking questions so that they get the answers that give them that idea. So they might ask you something like, what are the opportunities in this role or position, right? What are the opportunities for learning and growth? We are human beings, so we do want to learn and grow within companies. What is the most challenging aspect of it? So really being thoughtful in terms of, gosh, what is the most challenging aspect of this job or the role that you're going to have? Will it involve multitasking? Will it involve working, over the phone, which a lot of our younger generations don't have as much experience working on the phone. I have a niece who's 25 and she works in a museum, and her biggest hesitancy was, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to answer the phone at this museum. I don't have any experience doing that, and it makes me very nervous. Well, come to show that because of training and because of, the time that the managers took with her, she loves answering the phone. She loves interacting with the members of that museum and the customers, and it's one of the highlights of her job. So looking and seeing the potential in people as well. What does success look like, right? Really being clear with setting expectations and referring back to Gallup, as Jessica did. Gallup does polls on what makes employees really engaged. They want to know what are the expectations of me at work. I want to have clear expectations so that I know I can do my job well, or I aspire to do my job well. And they might ask you, what is your team like? So again, is it a collaborative team environment? Do you really support each other? Do you have your back? If you're not able to describe that in 3 words, or if you even have a few more words, then that's giving them an idea. That's sending them a message. Gosh, do they really, have a collaborative team? Is this a team I want to be a part of? So be prepared to answer those questions. And then also What is the mission? In these times, people are really looking for a purpose, and that's not necessarily to say they're looking for passion, but they want a purpose that aligns with their own values. So a company that can really confidently say, well, this is our mission, this is what we believe in, and then walk the talk during the onboarding process for that employee really gives them insight as to whether they're going to be a good fit within the company and whether the company aligns with their values and what's important to them. So Jessica touched on it a little bit, but we are seeing a trend in employers utilizing or bringing back employee referral programs. And I remember back in the day, at the beginning stages of my career, employee referral programs were really big. And then I think we just, again, had employers had so many candidates, they didn't necessarily need to implement an employee referral program, but they can be so impactful. They can be impactful for employees who feel a part of bringing people on that they're confident with, that they believe in. It can get management on board, right? You can create an easy referral process, and it's all yours in terms of when are you going to give any kind of incentive? What kind of incentives are you going to give? It doesn't have to only be a monetary incentive. Asking your employees, what would you want as a result if we hire the person you referred to? Maybe they want some flexibility in their schedules or other benefits or perks. So making it collaborative, right, so that everybody feels a part of it, and establishing some goals and maybe some boundaries, because you don't want people not to be selective when they're choosing the people they want to refer. You do want that. But also recognizing the employees when they have referred candidates. At the really height of the Great Resignation, we heard some employer stories about people waiting until they got the bonuses or the employees when they got the referral bonus, and then both of them would leave. So it's up to you to set some parameters in place, but it really can be engaging for the employee and also for the candidate. Gosh, I have a friend or I have a colleague on board. When people refer their companies, it means they really believe in their companies. When we're not having a great positive work experience, we're not going to tend to refer our friends or our colleagues or people we've worked with in the past. So they can be quite impactful. Curious to know if anybody here has an employee referral program and how do they track it, or how do they provide the incentives for employees? So beneficial for me to know just out of curiosity, but beneficial for the other people on this webinar. And then also you can track to see, is it bringing in new employees? Are they really staying? Is it bringing commitment from other employees when they do refer friends and colleagues? And are you following up with employees when you haven't? You don't have to explain why you didn't hire their friend or their colleague, but having that update and letting them know that yes, we didn't choose that candidate. We've sent them the update. We've provided that information. Again, can solidify again that you have a positive work culture and that you really are appreciative that they did refer someone even though you didn't end up hiring. So let's say you did hire them and you are going to start the onboarding process. So according to this survey by Glassdoor, an effective onboarding process boosts employee retention of new hires by 82%. So think about that. Think about your own onboarding program. You do not want that to be considered, just not thinking it through and not being prepared. If you've ever been one of those new employees and you got to the office on the first day and they had all the forms, but they didn't have your username or login. They didn't have your computer software set up. They didn't have your uniform yet. That's sending a message to that new employee, and that new employee is still deciding, how's this going to go? Am I going to work out here? So it's sending not a great message if we haven't planned it through, if we haven't prepared in advance to truly welcome that person, to really have everything in place. And yes, sometimes things happen with technology, and we can't get the username right away, but we can do other things Also with onboarding, we also want to make sure that we involve other people. If you are the HR manager, it isn't just your responsibility. Maybe you provide the new hire forms, but somebody else welcomes the candidate, somebody else does the schedule for the next 30 days, because you want everybody to get on board with this new employee. So that's why I'm going to bring up another poll. Which aspect of the onboarding process do you think is the most useful? Maybe, possibly a trick question. And you only have one option this time. So is it really being clear on the job expectations, training and development during those first 30, 60, 90 days? And depending on the position, the employee, it might take up a year for them to really acclimate to their role and to the company and to the organization, especially if they are coming from a different industry, right? We saw during the Great Resignation that people were leaving certain industries and starting brand new in other industries. So that can take a while for someone to really absorb and acclimate to the culture and all the processes and procedures. I think you picked up on on the trick. It was kind of a trick question. So it is really all of the above. Things to really think about when you are, let me share that for you. When you are thinking about the onboarding process, it's really important to think of all of these things because within the first 6 months, over 65%, I believe, will leave their job because what was explained in the interview process doesn't align with what's actually happening in the real world. So the clarity of job expectations should be explained in the interview process, should be consistent with what actually happens. So for example, if you tell someone they're never going to have to travel, this is all on site, and then the first day of the job, you start talking about traveling out of the city or out of the state, then it's not aligning. Or if you're really vague on what their job duties are going to be on a day-to-day basis, you're not setting them up for success. Then with training and development opportunities, really getting them acclimated to the different systems, different software, that's really going to help them. And if you do look at some of those food and beverage establishments, a lot of them invest a lot of time in customer service and in training. I used to work for a hotel chain years ago, and our new hire orientation process at the time, I think, took 4 weeks before they were actually out on the floor, out in the hotel. So there is a lot of investment, and even if you don't have time, again, splitting it up with other people so that you're not carrying the heavy load is important. Also, integration into the company culture, really showing that what you did talk about during the interview process actually happens, that there is a positive company culture and what the team dynamics looks like. One thing we do at CEA, even though most of us are actually working remotely or hybrid or sometimes in the office, so it's not always easy to meet everybody in person, is make sure that that new employee gets a chance to meet with every department and really understand what goes on in each department. Even if they're not interacting with that department all the time, it's really important that we're all aware and knowledgeable because you never know when you're going to need that department, for one, but also just that I have an awareness of how this company runs. And maybe there is potential in those other departments for for opportunities and growth. So other things to keep in mind with the onboarding best practices is, as much as you can, pre-board new hires. So if you have any swag at your company, send them some swag, making sure they have a schedule in advance via email, just so you are preparing them to know what's going to happen in the first week, in the first 2 weeks. If they are going to have some video training or some training and development, what does that look like? Just again, so they're getting in the right mindset. And then again, don't carry the heavy load. Always involve top leaders and team members. When I was working at that hotel years ago, by the way, but I still remember it. We had to kind of rile up the executive team, but they always attended our new hire orientations the first day, even if we only had 2 new hires that day. And that sent a message to the new employees that, gosh, we're really valued. The executives really care about us. And it's really showing me that there's a positive culture here. Also, what we find recently is that if you are in a situation where you have more of a hybrid workplace, that people are still looking for connection, not just productivity. So if you do have a potluck once a month, make sure that your new hire is involved in that. Ask them to bring something. Are you having some downtime so that you can just allow your new hire to get to know the other coworkers and peers? It's so important for that sense of belonging that Jessica mentioned, that sense that I can come to work and I can be my authentic, genuine self. What kinds of activities are available? What kind of team building? And incorporate that into the new hire onboarding process. Then always checking in, right? Even once we've let that new hire go and they're starting to do things on their own, we want to check in, see how they're doing. And again, reinforce company culture by our behavior and our own action. Because once things start looking differently than, again, what was discussed in the interview process, that starts the new hire questioning whether they took that job, whether it was the right decision or not. So some questions to think of that you would like that new employee to answer while they're experiencing the onboarding process is, again, reinforcing what you believe in for your company, for your organization, for your business. That could mean, employees first. That could be customers are key, are an integral part of our organization, and this is how we serve our customers. Also identifying areas for that employee to reveal what their strengths are. How am I going to utilize my strengths on this job, in this role? She didn't know it at the time, but my niece, became really great at the telephone. So that became her strength that she could contribute to the team, to the department. Also, what is my role? What am I going to be doing on a regular basis, day to day? Who are my partners? Who am I going to be working with? Different departments, different vendors, different customers. What is that going to look like? How is that going to show up for me? And then, is there potential for my future here? And we all know, many of us have had jobs where we just took the job maybe because we needed it for financial reasons. We didn't really see potential at the time that we were hired. But if, as a company, we can demonstrate that, hey, you're doing a great job here, there are opportunities for you for learning and growth, then that's sending some really good messages. And by the way, when I got that job at the hotel, I had no idea what human resources was. And that's the position I ended up with. So there's always room for opportunity. And when an employee sees that future potential, there's more likelihood that they will stay and you will retain that employee. So at the end of the onboarding process, and again, it can vary depending on the role, depending on the position, and if they come from a familiar background. But you really want to encourage employee feedback throughout. You want them to be able to say, gosh, this experience really did provide me with a clear outline of my job description and responsibilities. And we've hired some new employees within the last few years at CEA. And recently, some of the employees that I've talked to on our one-on-one say, gosh, I really didn't understand this before, but now I really understand it. And that's your goal during the onboarding experience. We don't want anybody to be left thinking, gosh, I don't understand this process. I don't understand how procedures run here. You really want them to have a clear understanding, not only of their responsibilities, but also of the company's mission and vision. What are they looking towards doing in the future? What are they currently focused on? Again, knowing who their points of contact are, making sure that they're developing those relationships with the people that they're going to be working with the most. So whether you have weekly calls or weekly meetings, that's really important for those new hires. I was introduced to managers from every department. That just so much makes an impact and makes people feel valued when you're taking the time out, whether you're a very small organization, which we are at CEA, or you're a larger organization. It makes so much, it makes such a difference. And then also, I feel well prepared to succeed in my job. So during the onboarding process, you made sure they have all the resources and tools they need in order to do their job well. So at the beginning, Jessica was touching on some of the new trends. And one of those trends was employers were kind of reevaluating, how are we going to attract talent? What do we need to do? And so they were looking at something that recruiters have been saying forever, which is not all positions need 10 years of experience. Not all positions need a college education or a college degree. So a lot of employers have reduced the amount of years for a requirement, or they've actually removed college degrees. And what that does is really expand the pool of candidates out there. And so in addition to that, that's expanding the opportunities for candidates that are listed here, the hidden talent, or many times the underrepresented. So you have foster youth. We went to a conference earlier this year focusing on really getting foster youth prepared so that they can be in jobs that are living wages. And we know foster youth have had challenges, Americans with disabilities, veterans, retirees, and then we'll talk about second chance hiring. But if you have never really thought about this and how do we widen that pool of candidates, and we're looking into doing this, my first recommendation is contact the Workforce Development Board, because they will partner with you. They will give you all of the resources for all of these areas or groups of individuals that have previously been underrepresented in the workforce, and help you really focus on getting those people hired. Comment. Oh, you answered that question already. But one service was referring to retirees, and baby boomers are retiring at a rate of 10,000 per day, but also many are continuing to stay or use their experience either as executives or in businesses that they worked at to give back. And we have also been privileged to hire retirees, because sometimes people retire and they realize, gosh, this isn't for me. I really value working, and so I'm going to get back in the workforce, and maybe we can work a situation where it is more flexible hours. So you get that experience of being a retiree, but you also get the experience of still being in the workplace, still doing something you love, or that gives you purpose. And I know Jessica has experience with SCORE. Are you available, Jessica, to touch on SCORE a little bit?
Of course. Yes, I personally did a lot of volunteer work for them when I was in between positions several years back. And the beauty of this organization is a lot of retirees, when they have some time, they spend time mentoring and working with employers and business owners. Yet many times they're in a gap time too, and so they may be looking for that next opportunity, or they may be someone that can come into your organization and really just hit the ground running too. Because a lot of times people retire, think they want to retire, then they retire and they think, I don't want to do this. There's not enough for me to do. We have found this personally at CEA and bringing on new talent through retirees. And SCORE can be another venue for you to join them, to be part of it, to just speak at their place and let them know that you are hiring. But it's a great organization, and it brings a lot of talent together on a regular basis, on a monthly basis.
Awesome. And then second chance hiring is obviously companies who really focus recruitment efforts on candidates who do have a criminal past. And over 70 million Americans have criminal histories. One organization that can help, in addition to, again, your Riverside Workforce Development Board, who does work with previously incarcerated individuals, is the Second Chance Business Coalition, which really promotes the hiring of those formerly incarcerated individuals who probably would have a challenge in terms of getting hired. And of course, we had Ban the Box that came about back in, I think, 2019. Kim can check me if that's not accurate, where it really gives an opportunity for those who have been previously incarcerated by not asking a person if they have a previous conviction initially in the application process. Again, it's helping widen that net for people who really do deserve a chance and an opportunity to work. So this was just a statistic that the Second Chance Business Coalition put out, which was very impressive. Within a survey of employers that were working with those individuals, 82% of managers and 67% of HR professionals reported that the value second chance employees bring to the organization is as high or higher than employees without records. So it really is about opening up that pool, but it's also about opening up our minds, right? Maybe 5 years ago, we would have thought for certain positions within our companies that we really absolutely needed that college degree. We absolutely needed 5 years of experience. And then we're opening our minds and looking for potential in others and looking in different avenues. And that's what the hidden talent is really all about, is giving those people who might have been overlooked, whether it was the AT application tracking system. It used to be a few years ago, oh my gosh, if someone has a gap in their resume, I'm not going to hire them. But as Jessica mentioned, we've all experienced a lot of life lows and highs in the last several years. So, and some of us had to put our families first, and maybe we had to take care of a loved one or a parent or childcare. So we're all kind of opening and expanding our minds to not being so rigid in terms of what we're looking for and who we're looking for. So I really encourage you, again, if you are challenged with hiring, that you look into working with the Workforce Development Board, because they have all sorts of opportunities for hiring, for job fairs, for really looking for those people who have been reskilled with specialized training. So you might have that niche job that you need help in hiring for. Those are opportunities. You don't have to do this alone. And those opportunities and resources are free to you, provided by the Riverside Workforce Development Board. So give it a try, open your minds, and you might find some really great employees. Another source of hidden talent that employers are looking for, especially as some of the larger companies are kind of putting a freeze on hiring, and we are seeing a skills gap that we're trying to fill, is looking internally, looking to our employees. Sometimes you can reveal hidden talents, hidden strengths, because somebody is doing one job. They haven't revealed that they do something that's technical or involved with technology or artificial intelligence, or someone has a really great speaking voice and communication. They might have a podcast on the side. You know, we have a lot of people engaging in a lot of side jobs these days and side passions. So identifying what are people's hidden talents that maybe you can help bring to light internally. So really observing your employees, asking them questions, seeing how they handle situations, handle different skills. Some things come naturally to people. And so maybe we want to pivot and see if they might want an opportunity to acquire some new skills that will bring a benefit to them and will bring a benefit to us as employers. So asking people, what are their professional interests? What are they interested in? And then that could really result in an interview and have those one-on-one conversations. So it is really important that we as managers, again, if you are in that position of a manager or leader, to identify what is the potential here? What do we have that might be lying underneath the surface? Because we've definitely had that opportunity at CEA and other organizations that I've worked at, where someone was doing one job. They were doing it fine, they were doing it well, but there was some hidden talent there. And when we identified that hidden talent, we were able to put them in the job that they really excelled at and were really passionate about. So don't forget those people that you are already working with that might have some also hidden interests that we're not aware of. All right, so we're bringing it to close. We always like to end with kind of, you know, it's a lot that we covered in the time that we had together. Is there something that you can take action on today to help enhance your hiring practice, or really to follow through and expand that pool of hidden talent? So feel free to put that in the chat. while I hand it back to Stephanie, who's going to close this out for us.
Hello, hello. Thank you for all that great information, Keisha and Jessica. And thank you everybody for being so engaged in our chat box. We appreciate it. Please make sure you write down this hotline number so you have it available later. Give us a call with any questions you come up with. And for those of you looking for your continuing education credits, thank you for pulling that up, Keisha. I'll also pop them into the chat box for everybody. If you're looking for your HRCI accreditation, the numbers are 66738. And if you're looking for your SHRM codes, it's 24 dash, the dash is very important, ANTXK. And we've had a few people asking about the recording. Yes, this has been recorded. It will be available through the Riverside website in a few days. And thank you, Keisha, for the survey. You are on it. Please snap a picture of that QR code, fill out the survey. It's just a handful of questions. It won't take you more than a minute or two to complete. We love getting your feedback, and it helps us really improve our webinars and presentations. So thank you so much in advance for sending us your feedback. Please give us a call on the hotline. We hope to talk to you soon, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.